So John, based on what we talked today, um, your story is a little different, right? You didn't think you were going to be alive. Like there was an end date for you, right, with the exchange.
Well, to be honest, my last 3 years on the trading floor, I was looking for a way off the trading floor.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because I think I was just pretty good. I didn't think I wasn't a superstar trader.
So what do you? So you weren't a lifer, right?
No, I thought it was exciting. Someone said to me once, which is really on target for me, was what we do is exciting, but it's not really interesting. The idea of buying something at an eighth and selling it at a quarter all day long just lost its charm after a while. It was the idea of, I like the idea of the mass market sentiment, and everybody appears, like I said earlier, someone from Omaha, Nebraska wants to buy something, and here it ends up within seconds in my hands, and I execute it, try to put out a quality execution. I love all of that, but it wasn't as, I liked it more for the camaraderie and being with the guys, and that's really what I liked about it, more than anything.
The drama.
Yeah.
So what do you do now?
I'm an author, I'm a writer, and I also host a radio show.
What was that something you always wanted to do, or is that something you stumbled into after the Amex?
Well, it was after the Amex, but it had nothing really to do with the Amex because it really was the where I was in life at that time. I'd always wanted to do something in the creative field, always my whole life. I used to write toasts for people. I used to help put together business presentations where the speaker would stand at the podium and I would write the presentation for them. And my wife actually encouraged me. She said, you should take some time to go do this. So I started taking classes on, there was how to structure a novel and how to structure a story. But really happened when my kids were old enough and my current business was established enough where I could spend 4 or 5 hours or on a weekend and spend the time to really work on it, because it is very time consuming. And it's very, you get drawn into it and there's no way out of it. And I know once I start, I just mentioned to Emily here, I'm working on a story. This is how it'll be for the next year or so until I finish writing it.
And a lot of your work is set in the financial world. So which do you think inspired what? Did the writing kind of come because you were there? Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, what inspired it, my first novel that really set things in motion, was the things we were speaking about here, and that is, I guess, in a nutshell, is how the technology started making the profit margin thinner and thinner, and the way certain people reacted to that. And I always equate it to like a gold mining town where the spreads in the market used to be this wide, and the gold, you could just pluck it right from the stream. Well, by the time I left, the spread was this wide, and all the mines were tapped out. Now, what happens to the people who were still there and the cutthroat atmosphere it creates? And the people trying to innovate and create and find a different way to make money. But that, of course, isn't fun to write in a novel. What's fun to write in a novel is the intrigue and the backstabbing. So that really is where it came from, because I did live that. My first novel, pretty much, I lived it, except for the really crazy stuff.
What's it called?
First novel is The Vig.
Okay.
And that is the vig, is the vigorish, the amount of money, it's the spread I just spoke about.
Why do you think so many people had such a hard time adjusting after all that went away?
I think that most people that worked on the floor had a hard time leaving. Even they physically left, they're still there in their head. And People went back to, oh, I got a job as a trader, or I started trading on a machine, or I went back for a couple years to the New York Stock Exchange. I think that really is the thing. For me, when I was gone, I was gone. Now, I stayed in touch with everyone socially, and I visited the trading floor, but I had no thoughts about going back once I finally did leave.
Right. But, I want to go back to the gold rush analogy that you gave. It makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
What is, why do you think people who believe in this pure market capitalist system are also having a hard time dealing with the consequence of the system when that's just sort of the natural way? The mines are going to get tapped out after a while.
Yeah.
Innovation is going to take over. So what do you think? Do you think that's a paradox?
I don't think it's a paradox, because I think in a lot of ways this is capitalism, this is the way it goes, we're all big boys, and we all understand a better way of doing it. But what I think happened in the markets, and is still happening in the markets, is it's not as pure as it once was. And I'll give you a brief story. When I was on the trading floor, I was in the crowd, the Spiders, SPY. It was the biggest crowd, and I would be there as an executing broker. So I would have what's called contingent orders. So I would have on my pad, sell the Spiders at whatever price with the futures that they hedged against at whatever price. And I noticed a pattern. This is around 2000, before I left the field. I noticed a pattern. And the automated system at the time just came to the specialist who was facing the crowd. Orders would come up, and he would say to the traders, you bought 5,000, you bought 3,000, you bought 7,000. Then on the other side, you sold 3,000, you sold 5,000. And it was all being divvied up. So I found out who the broker was who was sending the orders through that system. And I got dinner with him. I wanted to get his business. So I explained to him, this is the way, what's happening in that crowd. The Spider spread is this wide. The futures that they're hedging it with, 100%, is this wide. So when you put it in order to buy, they're selling you the Spiders here and they're buying the futures there. When you put in order to sell, they're buying the Spiders here and they're selling the futures there. And they're making money here all day long. So what I said, because I'm there on the floor, because I have access, thinking like an old school business person, I have access, I have superior knowledge. I know that between those markets, there's millions of shares offered. There's no reason to ever take an offer or hit a bid. So this is what I'll do. You send the orders to me on the floor through my clerk, and I guarantee you, when you're buying, I will never buy it on the offer. I will always do better. When you're selling, I will never buy it on the bid. I'll always do better, because I know. And think of all the money you're going to save for your clients. Think of how many eighths and sixteenths and quarters they're going to do better. They're going to love you. And he looks at me and he goes, I don't give a shit. I don't care about this. I don't care about this. When they buy it on the offer. They see that they bought it on the offer. They're happy. They see that they sold it on the bid. I'll go back to when I don't give a shit.
That's a good way to start.
So the guy looks at me and says, I don't give a shit. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. When my customers want to buy it, they see that they're buying it on the offer, and they see that they're selling it on the bid, and that's all they care about. Why should I, and I'm doing it for pennies on the machine, why should I start paying you to do better for them, meaning his own clients? And when that happened, I said, I have to get out. Because what that idea of commerce and the way that trading floor worked and what it represented was going to be just steamrolled. So it wasn't just the automation, it wasn't just the technology. I think the things that why people feel cheated, I guess, at work down there, and they can't verbalize it, it was that I don't give a shit. That is what happened. That is what changed. That's why the people that left the floor, were forced to leave the floor, feel, in a way, somewhat cheated. And it was because of that, I don't give a shit. I think they would understand if it was better or more efficient, but that became the motto of Wall Street for quite a while. But the long story is, now that automation took that guy out also. But for a while, the automation was only benefiting, it wasn't benefiting the clients.
What do you think? I mean, how do you feel? Like everyone kind of said that they unequivocally believe in the free market system.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that, are you then in a sense saying that the system, the markets weren't that free because they were, are you saying that they weren't that free?
I think the markets were...
Or became less free, rather?
I think the markets are appealing, and a free market system is appealing when you're on the trading floor and you have that access and you have that ability to do that. So that's one part of the equation. But the other part of the equation is, as simple as it sounds, people on Wall Street did used to care. They really did. I mean, these are the companies that, created America. They built the bridges that we're going to walk over. They built this walkway. This is what and I think they had the goose that laid the golden eggs, and not only did they cook the goose, but they leveraged it out to about 45 geese, and then a gaggle that would be. And they leveraged it out to a gaggle, and then they cooked it. That was really the problem.
Very well said. What do you think? Why do you think? Why do you think you didn't struggle with it like they did, like many of the others did?
Okay. Well, I did struggle, but I think I was lucky in a way that my struggle was condensed, put it that way. I left the floor voluntarily. I started working for an investment company as a trainee, and I went through everything most people go through. My boss was the same age as my clerk when I worked on the floor and all that stuff. So I went through that initial struggle, but I accepted it, and I knew that's the way it's going to be because I voluntarily went. I'm going to launch a new career, and I have to pay my dues. But what happened to me was I was visiting the floor of the American Stock Exchange representing my new company on 9/11. And I happened to be on the street when the South Tower collapsed. So I was in the middle of all of that. And so the emotional damage of that was tough. By November, my firm came to me and said, because my business was working with people on the floor, that was my platform. And my firm came to me and said, John, you're not bringing any business anymore, we have to let you go. So within 3 months, I went from being the star at the new company, everything going great, to being out, not only being out, but having no place to go to, because the American Stock Exchange wasn't a place to go back to at that time. And that was, for me, it was a six months maybe, that I was knocked on my ass for 6 months. For a lot of guys, it was 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And that's, I think, is because they kept thinking it wasn't over. I mean, I was like hit in the head and knocked down and got back up, rather than being, tortured by 1,000 cuts.
Right. It also seems like you have fond memories of it, but you don't romanticize that time. Like you're not living in the past.
Yeah.
What do you think? Why do you think that is? Is it because you kind of exercise all that through your writing, or to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I was never a good old days kind of guy. I would even now people will say, remember when we used to do so and so, and I would say, no, I don't remember. And I think I try to look to the future, but what has helped with the writing is that now I find myself writing things that took place in my past that I didn't remember until I put them on paper.
Right.
Or something that is a metaphor for something that's about me, and I don't even know it's a metaphor about me, or about somewhere I've been or something I've done. So that's my way, maybe. Maybe I sought that out as my way to go back.
What would you say to people that are kind of struggling with this transition? That you struggled, but you kind of Like, what would you say they should do? How should they deal with that? Your advice?
Well, I've always had a philosophy, and this is the philosophy of my radio show, which is don't give up your daydream. And I always used to say, everyone needs a thing. You need something. You need something outside of what you do to make money, something outside your family, something for you, something selfish. And I've said to my wife on numerous occasions, me starting to write probably saved my life. Because I would be one of those sitting in Brannigan's, drinking a beer, saying, oh, I never caught a break kind of thing. But I had that vehicle to go to. I had something, and it couldn't be World War II history. You don't have to do anything creative. You don't have to write anything. You don't have to play the violin. You just have to have something outside yourself that I think it feeds you. You know, it sort of fills the hole.
It's a passion.
The passion, yeah. You need a passion. Everyone has passion. They just don't know how to funnel it or how to channel it.
Do you also think that maybe perhaps some of the people there, their passion was their work? Like they because it's a recurring theme where Randy said that, Stu said that, Bob said that after that they started to value these things. Do you think that
Well, as far as people's passion being in their workplace, I would argue if they are inherently a passionate person, there is something else that they could channel it into. I've always felt bad for the guy who comes to work every day and he's always there and shows up early and never goes on vacation. First of all, he's got to watch out for because he's cooking the books. That's number one. But also, you think, man, you have to do something. And there's no time limit. You could start doing it now. You could start it when you're 60. You could start it when you're 30. It doesn't matter. But I think these are all inherently passionate people, intelligent people, hardworking people. Every single one of them can better themselves or help themselves transition to their next career by doing something and taking time for themselves and being a little selfish. I really believe that. I would like to say that one of the best things that ever happened to me was my wife encouraging me to write. I don't know that I would have taken my time.
Let me ask you a question and answer that, but wrap my question in your answer. So what kind of, how did you always, first of all, let me ask, did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
I always wanted to write, but I never thought that I would be a writer.
And when you first wanted to write, did you know right away that you were going to write about the financial industry?
Well, I had sort of a strange path to doing it. My first book, The Vig, was my story for a long time. It was my story. When I'd be driving, if I was in traffic on the highway, I'd be thinking, what would this character be doing now? If I was jogging, whatever I was doing in idle time, I would have my story. So I was writing the whole time. I just never had the impetus or the courage, and it does take courage to do this. I never had the courage to really say that I'm a writer. That's a big thing, saying you're a writer. That's very big.
How did you get that courage?
My wife encouraged me to take a writing class. So I took a writing class and I joined the intermediate class, even though I was clearly a beginner. And this was people who had already been published. So what I did, which was sort of deceivious, was every time there was an assignment, I would wrap one of the chapters of my novel that was in my head into the assignment. And I would, if it was in third person or if it was a narrative, I would put one of the chapters in there. So I would put one of the chapters into the assignment. What I found was, as we went around the table doing the reading, not that people were in tears or there was no spontaneous applause, but I was one of them. I was there with them. So that's when I got the courage to say I'm going to write, and I'm going to write a book. And that's what it did. So, 11 short years later,